Above and beyond Quez Watkins, Jalen Rager, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. Why the hell isn't this kid playing wide receiver for the Eagles? And don't tell me they didn't plan on it. That's what you have practice for. That's what you have game tape time for. How is he not ready to play wide receiver in this league?
You are fired up this morning, Jody.
Mac and Mac guys here on Birds 365. A little later on next hour, Chris Franklin, our buddy from NJ.com, will hop aboard and he'll help us preview the Eagles and the Bucks after the beatdown Eagles took at the hands of the Cowboys. Any people, as the scoreboard just kept ching-chinging with Cowboy points getting up to the 50 spot, anybody going, yeah, maybe this wasn't the greatest idea that Nick Sirianni decided to give basically the entire starting unit the night off. I know you and I sat here on Bird 365 and speculated it was going to be a preseason game-like atmosphere, and that's exactly what it turned out to be. And both you and I were on board with it. Anyone of your compatriots down there in the Eagle press box start rolling their eyes as the points kept rolling up for the Cowboys?
Well, I think there were a lot of people rolling their eyes. I think even Nick Sirianni was rolling his eyes. He showed some frustration at times. There were a couple times he was glaring at Mike McCarthy. I don't know. Yeah, for the first time.
You think so, huh?
I think in the moment he was a little bit frustrated. But no, I don't think it means anything. After the game, I've seen Nick as testy as I've ever seen Nick. When he kept getting, I think it was Bo Wolf kept asking him about the COVID strategy, the COVID shenanigans, as I like to say it. And he said, he got testy. He was like, they're sick. I'm like, and, everybody rolls their eyes at that. Magically, the one guy who's able to get over the sickness is the one guy's got to play one snap to get his, keep his consecutive game streak extended. It's amazing how science always lines up with what the NFL and NFL teams want. So I think he was a little bit upset that people are pointing out the obvious hypocrisy of what's going on, which is a bigger thing than the Eagles. But, he's the one who's got to get the brunt of it. And nobody wants to be reflected as somebody who's not taking this seriously, because you'll get shouted down in the town square and all that kind of stuff. But they used it as a strategy. Obviously, I'm sorry. If you're watching this, Nick, I'm sorry. The Eagles used it as a strategy. There's nothing wrong with it. You didn't break any rules. That's what the NFL allows you. But I think he showed some frustration with that as well. So I think in the moment...
Right, so let me interrupt you for a second, and I'm not disagreeing with you. I just want to add to the discussion. If you're telling me that, and you're judging from a distance, you're not right there on top of him, that Nick Sirianni didn't like the questions as they were asked. Tough toenails, Nick. You used it as a strategy within a rule strategy. Borderline and a plausible strategy to give yourself roster flexibility. You elevated 11 practice squad guys. There's a reason they're on the practice squad, because they're not as good as your first 50 guys. So when you put them out there for long stretches against a team that's going to the playoffs, that's won your division, you should not be shocked or taken aback by the holy mackerel, the Cowboys put up a 50 spot. Yeah, they should have against your practice squad guys. If you're going to do that to give yourself a competitive advantage, which you see next week in the playoffs, because your guys are well rested, okay, fine, that's good. Take your medicine, to use a probably poor choice of words, since we're talking about COVID here. Take your medicine. Suck it up. You ate a 50 spot. You chose to do that by playing all your practice squad guys. You're not going to get any sympathy from me or most Eagle fans, buddy. You made the call the way you made it. You didn't care about the outcome of the game. Well, the outcome of the game is They hung a 50 spot on you. Suck it up and take it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, the questions, he had to be prepped. He knew they were coming at some point. It's an obvious subterfuge of whatever word you want to use. And again, it's not against the rules as they have reshaped them.
Correct.
And that was, by the way, that was what made me say Howie Roseman is a top 5 general manager. That move, not talent evaluation, because the Eagles are always looking for a slight advantage and they're always gaming the system as best as possible. They probably do it better than anybody but New England. They're right in that top tier category. They take advantage of every little thing to try to get the slightest advantage to win a football game. This is what they did to try to get a slight advantage in advance of what turns out going into Tampa Bay. I personally have no problem with it. Now, I do think as a competitive person, as I said, in the moment, I think Nick Sirianni was a little frustrated at times in the moment. I don't think it means anything. I don't think it's worth even discussing. I only bring it up because there was some obvious moments on the sidelines where he was a little upset. But, you asked me, is anybody going to hold this against him? No, unless they lay an egg and get completely blown out in Tampa Bay. Then, yeah, people are going to play the revisionist history game and say, you should have played your guys. You blah, 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 blah. They're going to do that. But that's just the nature of the NFL.
Right. And I think Sirianni, even though he's still wet behind the ears, first year, whatever, that much I think he gets. That they made a call as an organization, and they're going to sink or swim with it. They're going to live and die with it. And we'll see what kind of a healthy roster they have coming into the first playoff game against Tampa. All right, John, I want to get your opinion on this because you're a guy who's in the trenches, on the beat every day, see every press observation that the Eagles offered during the course of this year. I got a call on my CBS show over the weekend, and I thought a caller woefully overstated something, and I just want to confirm it with you because you know better than me because you're there every day. He was not a big Jonathan Gannon fan and said he thought that the Eagles would not be able to win as long as Jonathan Gannon was their defensive coordinator. Well, they have already won and they've already made the playoffs. So he's wrong to begin with. Yeah. But let me finish making the point he attempted to make. He thinks that Gannon was completely dictated to by Nick Sirianni after the Eagles got off to the slow start that they did. I'll tell you, that was just as much about the offense as the defense and not committing to run the ball until a certain, but the defense wasn't great early in the season. And you and I and a lot of other people sat here and criticized Gannon for not being aggressive enough. That, all right, fine. You want to sit back in the zone, not give up any other plays. Watch the other team take 11 plays to go down the field and stick it in the end zone to get you, Jonathan. Death by 1,000 cuts is still death. We certainly said it here. He said that he believes Nick Sirianni, he basically threatened Jonathan Gannon with his job if he didn't get more aggressive. I know he passed one comment in one press gathering about talking to Gannon that, yes, he wanted
hard conversation.
Had a hard conversation with him. When was that?
That was very early in the season. I'll have to look back and try to do it in the break on which game, but obviously there were a number of games in the 2-5 start where, yeah, the 80-90% might have been after the Vegas game. Everybody was Vegas. That was the game that kind of turned the season around. His job was never threatened. He was never in danger of being fired by Nick Sirianni. It's amazing how people take a baton and run with it. And that's one of the things you have to be careful of as an NFL head coach. Because when you say things, and Nick is more honest and more willing to share things than most NFL head coaches. I mean, he and Sanders says it was after the Chiefs loss, according to the Inquirer. So That's probably correct after the Chiefs lost, and obviously that Patrick Mahomes was one of the 80% club, and the Eagles were not playing well defensively. What are the things I think, because Nick is so typically so affable, and I brought up him getting upset about the COVID questions as an example after this game. He gets mad. He yells at people. He's got, and I'll say that as well. You know, he's Italian. He's got the temper as well, and you know, he's not afraid to uh, make his thoughts and processes and what he wants done known. And he was not happy about how the defense was playing. But you know, this glorious change, I don't know what people think they're seeing. There hasn't been this glorious change on how the Eagles play defensive football. You know, they made some evaluation mistakes early, most notably Eric Wilson. And you moved to TJ Edwards, which was a big pivot point of this season for this particular defense. Who, by the way, TJ Edwards was one of the few starters dressed against the Cowboys, but didn't play at all. Right. So he and Jordan Mailata dressed, but didn't play at all. They came in to Saturday night's game with the third lowest blitz rate in the NFL.
I was going to ask you that exact question. I knew they were in the bottom 5. Third lowest blitz rate?
Third lowest blitz. So this assumption
and that's with a transformation, a Nick Sirianni injected transformation, supposedly in Jonathan Gannon, that got him to be this uber aggressive guy. They're still third from the bottom in blitz rate. So you are 100% right. There hasn't been that big a change in the Eagles defense.
No, it's the players executing better. We mentioned Darius Slade. We mentioned the cornerbacks as a whole. The safeties, Rodney McLeod, as he's gotten farther off. The ACL injury has started to play a little bit better. Marcus Epps has gotten involved and played, I think, better than people expected. And most notably, the defensive line has played much better in the second half of the season than the first half of the season. And that's what the Eagles' whole defense is based on, that defensive line. And when they play well, the Eagles usually play well defensively. When they don't play as well, they don't play as well defensively. And then you do have the quarterbacks, which is the simplest explanation of all. They struggled with good quarterbacks, and they did well against bad quarterbacks. Magic. It's like magic, Jody.
It is. And John, by the end of the week, you're going to want to punch me in the face. I'm going to continue to return to. Yeah, and then there's Tom Brady. Who
did not play well against Tom
Did not
Brady.
play well against him, and they've got to play against him in his house this Sunday rather than here at Lincoln Financial Field like earlier in the season. And even though Dak Prescott did what he did to the Philadelphia Eagles, yes, those players in uniform on Saturday night were Philadelphia Eagles practice squad players playing in an NFL game. I'd rather take my chance of trying to stop Dak Prescott than stop Tom Brady like they're going to have to on Sunday. Flip-sided, Kenny Gainwell, big game on the offensive side, had become kind of a forgotten man in the Eagle backfield, with Miles Sanders being the number one, Jordan Howard off the scrap heap, jumping in when necessary, helping the Eagles win games. Boston Scott, all he does is score touchdowns and make big runs. Kenton Gainwell kind of got pushed to the sidelines, pushed into the shadows, got the chance with all three of the top 3 running backs being out. Certainly showed up against Dallas's number 1 defense. All right, they were missing Diggs. All right, they were missing Micah Parsons. But basically the rest of the, and they were missing Curse, their safety too.
Yeah,
so the Cowboys actually were down a couple of players.
Yeah.
But still, a good number of their starters, Kenneth Gainwell, came up pretty damn big for the Eagles on a game that they didn't really even need to win, but he got to show up and show out. How does that affect the way that he'll be used in the playoff game on Saturday, do you think?
It's a good question. I don't think much, to be honest, Jody. And a lot, look, if Miles Sanders is back, and we had that discussion a little bit last week, get a better, hopefully better indication. Nick's going to talk at about noonish, 12:15ish today. Um, if Miles plays, I don't think he's going to be involved at all with the offense for the most part. Remember, the strength of Kenny Gainwell at this point is really the receiving aspect of things, and we'll use Tom Brady. Look at Tom Brady, how he uses his backs traditionally in the passing game, and really even more so New England than now in Tampa Bay. But he still gets everybody involved, whether it's Fournette, Jones, Bell. I forget who they started yesterday. I don't even keep Vaughn. He gets everybody involved in the passing game. It's not the Eagles' thing, and at this stage, they're not that type of offense. I think one of the most interesting comments, I asked Nick about who stood out in the game, and he brought up Quez Watkins. And he made a quote, and I'm paraphrasing, it's not direct. The fact that Quez ended up with over 600 yards in this type of offense, he thought was a big positive. And I thought it was interesting that he said this type of offense, because he's telling you something there. Look, they don't throw the ball a lot. And, Kenny Gainwell, if he were on Tampa Bay, I think would be a big, impactful part of a third down package. The Eagles aren't going to do that right now. So it's going to be Miles. It's going to be Jordan Howard. It's going to be Boston Scott. And if it's not Miles, it's going to be Jordan Howard and Boston Scott. So there's not a lot to go around past that.
I am a Nick Sirianni fan. I think I've well established that here on Birds 365. I didn't bury him when he had his introductory press conference the way some others did. I've liked the guy and have talked about him getting votes for Coach of the Year in the National Football League this year. Shame on him.
Oh, wow.
Shame on him. And I'm not talking about him getting upset because the Cowboys got 50 points against him. He didn't want to cop to using the COVID list to expand his roster. No, this is what I'm referring to. He's had months, not days, not weeks, months to get Kenny Gainwell up to speed as a slot wide receiver for this football team.
Hey, by the way,
months to prepare for this.
By the way, they haven't.
Jordan Howard stepped in and showed that he could run the football, and they didn't need Kenny Gainwell as their third back in the triumvirate of backs. They should have been practicing, working on getting him up to speed as a split-out player. Above and beyond Quez Watkins, Jalen Reagor, J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. Why the hell isn't this kid playing wide receiver for the Eagles? And don't tell me they didn't plan on it. That's what you have practice for. That's what you have game tape time for. How is he not ready to play wide receiver in this league?
You are fired up this morning, Jody. I'm going to turn this around.
Somebody gave me a hard time on Twitter about, Kenny Gainwell looked good. You said Kenny Gainwell couldn't play. No, neither you nor I said last week Kenny Gainwell couldn't play. I said Kenny Gainwell could be thrown into the fire, into the deep end of the pool, because the Eagles' top three running backs all might be out of the game. I didn't say he was going to sink. I just said it was a big ask they were asking for. And, oh, by the way, he came up big and one of the few players who played well for them on Saturday night. So I'd like to figure out a way how to get him more involved in this playoff game against Tampa. Oh, here's an idea. Maybe you split him out and use him as a wide receiver, because your wide receivers stink after Devontae Smith. And have they gotten to that point? 2 months. 2 months they've had to get ready for this, and he still doesn't get split out.
I'm going to turn this around on you for Nick Sirianni. But first off, I'm going to give you some advice. Just hit the mute button on Twitter. It's not worth it. But second,
I like to listen to the people. Sometimes they come up with really good points.
Well, but if you start to say things that weren't said and you start to give the old misinformation, that's where I shut it down. However, Devontae Smith, it was about 2 weeks ago, let the cat out of the bag and he said, Kenny's in our room. When Kenny's in our room, the Eagles have been working on it. So you got to give, and Kenny Gainwell, all of a sudden, Devontae Smith says this sort of off the cuff. And I'm like, what? And the ears raised. And sure enough, next time I'm at practice, I'm watching the wide receivers. Kenny Gainwell started with the wide receivers. Then he went over to the running backs and individual drills. So Nick Sirianni, the guy you're blasting there for not doing it, is working on it. So you got to give them at least to the credit. Obviously, they're not at the point where they want to use it, but they are working on it. And they probably had the same idea that you had and said, well, guess what? These guys aren't very good. Let's see if we can get Kenny up to speed. But, it is a difficult transition. It's not like you can just throw it out there and roll it out there and say, Kenny Gainwell can turn into an NFL receiver running routes. And, it's a different ball game. Generally, running backs, even the really good receiving running backs, remember who they're dealing with. They're typically coming out of the backfield dealing with linebackers, maybe a strong safety occasionally if you're really good. Then all of a sudden, if you put them out wide, a lot of times they have to deal with corners if they're playing an actual wide receiver position. And then what is a matchup strength turns into a matchup weakness, because even the Kerry Vincents of the world and the Zach McPhersons of the world are going to be able to lock down running backs. So it is something that, it's a good idea. You've mentioned the idea. I've mentioned the idea. Why not try it? Because the Eagles wide receivers are so poor and the back end of the depth chart. They're working on it. They are working on it. Devontae let the cat out of the bag.
Again, you know better than me. Thank you for clarifying that for me. I thought this about week 5, maybe week 6. We're in week 18, John. It's been 12 weeks. After the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season, I would have started to at least think about and ask the wide receiver, hey, can we get Kenny to get a couple of reps with you guys? They're a little late to the party is my only point. And if they don't have him prepped and ready by this point, it's because they were a little late to the party. I'm not an Eagles coach, but 5 or 6 weeks into the season, I could see, this wide receiver group really isn't very good. We got one stud in Devontae Smith, and then we got a bunch of facsimiles at best. How can we add to it? Howie, what's the chance you get me a wide receiver? Oh, no, he didn't do that before the trade deadline. Howie, how about getting one off the scrap heap for me? Oh, he hasn't been able to do that. Oh, we got Kenny Gainwell here. How about we try and transform him to a wide receiver? Oh, it only took him till you're telling me the first time was the last couple of weeks. Week 13, week 14.
I don't know when it started, but and the only reason we know is because Devontae brought it up out of nowhere. Nobody asked him, and he said, somebody asked him, it was more of a rookie question, his fellow rookie class, and they started he started running down some of the rookies, and he mentioned when Kenny's with us, and that's when my ears perked up. And yeah, sure enough, he's been working with the receivers. So they are cross-training him. I don't know when it started, but it's interesting. Now that you bring this up, I'm going to have to ask Nick this at some point. It's tough to waste it on a playoff week, but I'm going to ask him at some point when it started and what the goal is, and hopefully he'll give some information on that. But who knows? If I'm late in the press conference today, maybe I'll even ask it today. If all the other stuff is
there, you go. If everything is already been asked, I'd really like to know that. And oh, by the way, the guy who's going to get the ball to Kenny Gainwell, if he does play any wide receiver in this game up against Tampa, is Jalen Hurts, who is on the sideline, masked up, warm, not even activated for the game. They said that the week will truly help his ankle. I don't think it could possibly hurt. I don't know how much better it's going to get. He looked pretty good in the last game he played. I'd say he's damn close to 100% as is. Playoffs, first ever. He played in major playoff games on the collegiate level, had phenomenal games in big spots, was lifted from one championship game at one point. But what kind of we know he's going to have the right mindset because he's just that kind of kid. He preps well. He doesn't get overly excited. He's got a calm, cool demeanor about everything. How do you think he handles the pressure that is NFL playoffs?
I think he handles that part of it well. I with Jalen, I never questioned the intangibles. I've said this numerous times, and it's true. It's almost backwards of a normal, typical young quarterback. Like Justin Herbert, you saw last night. Joe Burrow would be the two young quarterbacks who I look at and say, okay, those guys are going to be superstars in this league. But when you talk, and even maybe Trevor Lawrence is a better indication of this because he's such a good prospect, but obviously had a terrible rookie season in a terrible team. But you saw even week 18, you saw some, what people see in Trevor Lawrence.
Yep.
When you talk about young quarterbacks, that's the stuff you worry about. Okay, he has the talent, but does he have the intangibles? Does he have the leadership? Will people follow him? Is he cool under pressure? Can he handle the 2-minute drills? Can he lead a team back? That's the kind of stuff you worry about and say, well, if he can do that, if he can figure out that part of it, he's going to be really, really good. With Jalen, it's the exact opposite. He's a flat line. He never gets rattled ever. It's amazing, almost to the point at his age. And you worry, okay, if you're down 2 scores, does he have the ability to bring you back? Does he have the passing ability to just sit in the pocket? And that's been one of the silver linings of this ankle injury. He's been forced to sit in the pocket much more. The running game hasn't been as big of a part of it, and he's won games. Not always the prettiest thing in the world, but, as JG will say, we'll bring him up, what's the only stat that matters? People bring up pressure rate and sacks and blah, blah, blah. And he always says wins and losses. That's the only thing I care about. Same thing with quarterbacks. He's winning games. Are the style points there? Is he going to throw for 525 yards? No. Do you win the game? He finds ways to win games. I don't think the moment's going to be too big for him. I don't even worry about that.
Yeah, nor do I. And the thing that has impressed me most over the last 3-4 games when he's been dealing with the ankle injury after he was injured is not only staying in the pocket, but stepping up in the pocket, which he really didn't do for the first 5-6 games of the season. As soon as the pocket collapsed, he was gone. He's taken off. He's running. He's stepping up in the pocket to either make a play or stepping up into the pocket and then going sideways and doing something off schedule. He really has improved greatly in that for me over the last month of the season. And he's going to have to do it against the Bucks because they do get after the quarterback a little bit. Shaq Barrett, who's been out of their lineup the last couple of weeks, mentioned back in the first segment about the banged up Bucks. The Bucks are getting a little healthy. It looks like they're going to get Shaq Barrett for this game. They may get Leonard Fournette. The banged up Bucks might not be as banged up as by the time the game rolls around on Sunday. He's John McMullen. I'm Jody McDonald. We're your Mac and Mac Birds 365 guys. Come back, talk more about the matchup with Tampa coming up on Sunday. Chris Franklin from NJ.com will join us in hour number 2 here on Birds 365.